Too much iron in the diet. Oh, hi. I didn't see you sitting there. I'm Dr. Whiteman, and I'm a researcher here at the Imaginativity Institute. And my technical job is chemical taster. But it wasn't always this way. Let me tell you a story about a time I worked as a doorman in a Tallahassee day club. It wasn't a great existence, and I was down on my luck until a man by the name of Ruth came into my life. Ron saw inside me something, and he fanned this flame of creativity, just a spark that grew into a flame. And now I'm the lead chemical taster here at the Imaginativity Institute. Oh, who's Ron? You might know Ron Ruth as a 27-year veteran of the wedding industry and as a speaker at numerous DJ and wedding conferences, including the past 5 years at the Wedding MBA. Today, he's known as the founder of the Imaginativity Institute, a place where after years of research, scientists have discovered how to effectively and safely blend inspiration, imagination, and creativity to produce innovative solutions to complex business challenges. The Imaginativity Institute, a place where researchers are high-fiving, shaking hands, because they're getting stuff done. Get ready for there to be a fire, a creative fire. Please welcome to the stage the man I call Professor Imaginativity, Ron Ruth. Second, it's real good.
I absolutely love that video, and I thought it would be a great opening to today's show. So welcome, everyone, to another installment of Ron Ruth Presents here on Disc Jockey News TV. It's so good to have you here, and it's even better to have my very special friend that you just saw in that video a few moments ago. His name is Michael Foster. He goes by Foster, and actually Foster is a corporate improviser. He's the co-owner of YesCo, and he's also a voiceover actor here in the Kansas City area. Hello, Foster. How are you?
Hello, Ron. Thank you for having me. And if you noticed in that video, to be able to pronounce Imaginativity, my head had to do like a little jerky motion. Imaginativity, because it's very hard to say. It's a lot of syllables. I
remember when we did. I mean, I had like about 4 hours of footage for that minute and a half of a video that we could have easily turned into a what do they call it? Not a gag reel, but an outtake reel. There you go. Yeah, would have been a lot of fun to do that. But today, Foster and I, the reason I invited Foster to join me today is because I want to talk about something that's near and dear to my heart, and I know it's near and dear to Foster's heart as well, and that's the art of improvisation. I started improvising about 5 years ago, and that's actually how I met Foster. Foster, tell me, something, in all the years I've known you, I don't think we've actually really discussed. How did you get into improv?
Okay. I first got into theater in high school.
Right.
I kind of peaked in high school when I was in a production of A Midsummer Night's Dream, my junior year, and I fell in love with acting. I knew I wanted to study it in college. And so I studied theater at Truman State University in Kirksville, Missouri. Go Bulldogs! And I was here. And here's the thing: is even though I am an actor, I'm a performer. I can be very introverted. I can be very shy.
Right.
And I wasn't very good at like the networking game in terms of like getting cast for stuff. I think I was doing pretty decent auditions, but I wasn't getting cast in any of the main stage shows. And so I was becoming like slightly like disillusioned. And I was just walking to or from class one day, and on the sidewalk, in sidewalk chalk, there was an announcement for auditions for a new improv group.
Yes.
And I went, and I think looking back now, it wasn't necessarily great improv that I did at the audition, but I made enough of an impression that I got cast, and then I just fell in love with improv. We started doing what is known as short form comedy or short form improv, which is very similar to Whose Line Is It Anyway style.
Right. Yeah.
A series of games with a layer on top of it, and that's when I started doing it professionally, because we did charge for shows. It was not much. It was like in college, it was like a quarter. I don't know why we even charged anything, but I don't know. And then that was Tag Improv, and I've been involved with it ever since. And since then, I've become, a producer, a director, a teacher, a corporate facilitator, a team builder. And I absolutely love it. And it's in every aspect of my life. And you mentioned I'm a voice actor too, and I utilize my improv skills with that as well.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned that you. I just can't, for some reason I'm just trying to imagine you doing Shakespeare. I don't know. I just I have a hard time picturing that. And you were talking about the 25 cents to get in for admission. One of the fun things about the improv community, at least here in Kansas City, is that so many times they'll do a show and it's pay what you will. Which I find that, I mean, there are a few other businesses. Actually, I don't know of any other businesses that can survive on pay what you will.
Right.
But people do go to those shows, and I don't know how much that they actually pay out to attend. But that's the commitment. I also think that's a reflection of the improv community as far as wanting to perfect their craft, just being able to perform in front of an audience. We don't care how much you pay, just come and sit in the audience and react and laugh and let us know that we are doing what we're doing well by the way you react to what we're doing, which is kind of convoluted, but that's really what it boils down to.
Yeah. And it's funny you mentioned that. We just, I guess speaking for improvisers, we just want to have an audience there that wants to laugh, just that's funny and interesting, and dare I say weird, at times. And it's funny you mentioned the admission, because I went to LA a few years ago.
Easy for you to say.
And UCB, the Upright Citizens Brigade Theater, is up there with like Second City and these major. I mean, they're still just charging $10.
Wow.
You know what I mean? Like on the West Coast. And I think that's pretty fantastic.
So now you're taking your improv skills along with another good friend of mine, Jamie Campbell, and you've started a company called Yesco, which is a company that does what?
So it's utilizing improv for business.
Okay.
And there's kind of different wings of that. There's different branches. So recently we've really been utilizing improv for networking. So basically adding fun to your standard kind of networking events.
Yeah.
Because they get kind of awkward. People generally will just talk to people that they already know.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes they're not really fun. It's kind of a chore. And so we utilized improv. So, improv games. So there's a performance aspect with audience participation. We sometimes do breakout groups where we say, hey, this is your task. You're going to come up with this presentation. Oh, and by the way, you're only going to get like 3 minutes to put something together. And that's okay. You're going to be confident and okay with that. So there's the networking aspect. There's, of course, the entertainment aspect, holiday parties, putting together a show that or that incorporates the company's culture and is just highly interactive. That's a lot of fun. And then there is like the third branch, which is the team building or the skill building.
Right.
And that's if you want to work on, things like communication. If you have a team, a certain department, and you really want to build up that team and work on certain skills, like, soft skills, then improv is also really good for that.
And I don't think there's really a performance art anywhere that puts people on the same level all at one time, regardless of the level of experience or how much, when you're in a corporate environment, especially when it comes to a networking event, you're right. Networking events can be extremely awkward.
Yeah.
People kind of hang out in their little cliques and they don't really want to socialize very much. But the way I've been to a couple of your networking events where you've done improv, but what it does is it really breaks the ice because it puts everyone in a situation where they are all playing on the same level playing field. Doesn't matter how much experience they've had in business or what their family life is like or anything else. This is like, everybody's going to be on the same level playing field. And what I don't know that a lot of the viewers here know is that improv has become so important, not just in networking, but in the business environment that major universities, first off, are incorporating improv as a part of, especially for students working on their master's degree in business and accounting. It's part of the program now, the curriculum. And so many Fortune 500 companies use improv to help their employees learn better communication and crisis management skills. So there's tremendous value. Improv, obviously, for you and I, it's a fun performance art, and our goal is to make people laugh. But it's so much more than that. So what are 3 ways you think improv might be able to help businesses, just businesses in general?
Well, one you just kind of touched on is just the fact of humor. If you can somehow inject humor into business, I think that's great, because if you think about the teachers who were important to you, like in high school, generally they were fun. They incorporated humor.
Absolutely.
Right? You might have had teachers who were just like at the top of their game, but maybe weren't fun. They were very dry, and they don't really stick out in your memory. So humor in any capacity, with that shared experience, we're laughing, we're releasing endorphins, and we're bonding over that. I think that's great if you can incorporate humor. So
I think laughter disarms people. It does. It just kind of makes whatever it is that they're feeling, it just kind of disarms that laughter. Laughter is contagious too. So
yeah, and it's very contagious. So laughter and humor, I think, are great. Improv really relies on listening. I think we'll probably talk more about this later, but the main rule of improv is yes and. So saying yes to an idea and adding on to it. And that's where yes-co comes from. That's where the yes and yes-co comes from. So you have to be listening, because you can't say yes to something that you didn't hear.
Right.
You can't respond to something you didn't catch. So listening, and since business has to do with humans and humans have to communicate, being better at listening is just going to make you overall better at your game. Even if customer service, listening to coworkers' ideas, that type of thing. So I guess that would be number 2. And then third, it just is better for, it's a great tool for collaboration, because you can't build something unless you're working together. And when you build something through agreement, it's really quite wonderful. And it may not be the best idea you've come up with, but it will be better if you were just on your own. And by saying yes, you're building it up and coming to, and who knows where those ideas will take you. That's one of the reasons I really love improv, is there are absolutely no limits to the ideas you can create.
Yeah, I mean, and it helps you overcome the fear factor. I mean, because so much in the creative. Well, I'm a huge believer that and actually this is kind of a Disney philosophy. Did you know I'm a Disney freak? This is kind of
this is the first I've heard of this.
Didn't know. I'm of the belief, as I teach in the Disney Institute, that creative processes should never end when business processes begin, because the two are they're dependent on each other. And so but what happens in the business world is that we're so often, business owners are afraid to be creative because they don't want to fail. They'd rather stick with the tried and true and the status quo. And by doing that, by not taking any risk, you're not going to have an opportunity to do what I would consider to be amazing, spectacular things. It's always just going to be the norm. And in today's world, though, when it comes to business, customers are looking for those businesses that stand out. What is it that makes you stand out? And the only way you're going to be able to stand out is if you are willing to, God, I hate this term, get out of the box and think outside of the box and do something unique. So let's kind of explore a couple of those things that you talked about. You spoke a little bit about the first, if I'm not mistaken, the first rule of improv is to say yes, to agree. And in business, I mean, and then again, this is something a lot of business owners seem to have an issue with, is saying yes to a customer. It doesn't really matter how crazy a customer's idea might be. There's still no reason why you can't say yes to it, because by saying yes, you're at least, what you're saying is, I accept your idea. I'm taking what you said for the value that you've given it. But by saying yes, and you're also going to say, but let me see if we can make it a little bit better. So yes, I like that idea. All right, and it may be something none of us have ever done before, but let's just and it and say, okay, but what if we were to take this idea and do this next thing? That's kind of what?
Yeah,
Works
And if it's not, and I mean, if somebody comes to you with an idea that's just like, that's that our business doesn't do that. That's, and your gut reaction is like, that's impossible. Well, I'm sure there's some aspect of that idea that you can say yes to.
Right. Well, and I think a lot of people are also afraid of, they don't realize when you think of improvisation, you think of this is something that happens on stage. We are all improvisers every day of our lives. I mean, everything that we do, even in this conversation, I have no idea what you're going to say. You have no idea what I'm going to say. So we're just playing off of each other here and responding to what the other one is feeding us. That's the way it is in everyday life. So people that go, well, I'm not an improviser. Yeah, you are. And it's important to be able to embrace that, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And I come from the philosophy, I think everyone should do improv. And that's not to say like everyone should make time in their schedules to perform like on the weekends at a theater. No, I mean, taking classes, doing some kind of training, because you will, well, first off, at the very base level, if anything else, it's just a blast to do. It's so much fun. Right. And then you are going to build up on these skills, like you said, we are all improvisers. And, there's so many people who start doing it just to work on maybe public speaking, but they find so many other things and they make friends and they, it makes you, I truly believe it makes you a better human because you have to respect everyone's ideas and everyone has to respect your ideas and you cannot have judgment because then improv doesn't work and it falls flat on its face. And, if you do that in a show, it makes everybody uncomfortable, especially the audience.
Oh, absolutely. Well, going back to this idea of yes, one of the things that at least one of the lessons I think I learned from taking improv is that saying yes is also one of the first steps in establishing a relationship with people, whether it's with somebody else on stage or whether in business, whether it's with a customer. If you and I were to, whether it's a theater setting or a business setting, if I were to say to you, Foster, what do you think about if I had originally come to you and said, hey, Foster, you want to talk about improvisation? If you had said no, well, we wouldn't be here having an opportunity to talk. Right. No is a conversation stopper. And it doesn't matter. And it's funny because it doesn't matter, especially in business, it doesn't matter how many times you say yes to an idea, to a customer's ideas or whatever. The moment you say no, you've erased all those yeses. It just, all of a sudden, the scene or that relationship is going to come to a total and complete stop. It's a relationship killer in essence. Right. Wouldn't you agree?
I would, yeah.
So let's talk a little bit more about yes and. One of my favorite quotes comes from Tina Fey in her book. She wrote a book called Bossy Pants, which has to do with the 5 rules of improv. And on the topic of yes and, she said, her quote is, say yes and you'll figure it out afterwards. In other words, after you say yes and, you just have to hope that whoever's across from you is going to say yes and back to you and continue to build on an idea.
Yeah, and I can relate this to being on stage and performing. It's just, it's the easiest thing. And well, for some people, I guess maybe it's not easy to just say yes, to agree. But once you do, sometimes you find yourself like in this wonderful mess. And I truly mean wonderful. And then you and your scene partner have to navigate it. You have to justify it. You just said yes to being on Mars and you didn't realize that the scene was taking place on Mars until just that moment. And then you kind of have to scramble. But it's wonderful because it's very engaging. It works your brain. And it's very fun to have to figure those things out, figure out that puzzle.
Well, and yes and is probably one of the most important tools when it comes to brainstorming. You saw me reach over a few moments ago because I forgot to get my prop out. One of my favorite books in the whole world is a book called Hatch. It's written Brainstorming Secrets of a Theme Park Designer. It's actually written by a former Disney Imagineer, but also he was a improviser in San Francisco with an improv troupe in San Francisco for a number of years. Oh, awesome. And in his book, he describes how brainstorming as most people know it, is a bunch of people kind of sitting around in a circle, and everybody kind of throws out a whole bunch of ideas, and then after a period of time, people just get bored and they go, okay, well, let's just go with that one. Joe's idea, because, well, it's probably less work. It's going to be less expensive, and then they all wind up gathering again 30 days later to complain about how that idea didn't work for some reason. Right. Go figure. And he talks about how brainstorming, really the yes and effect of brainstorming that works extremely well in business is taking away all the boundaries that typically come with usually come with yes anding. Nothing is ridiculous. No idea is over the top. No idea is impossible. It doesn't matter. You just start building and building and building, and then even if the ideas are a bit outrageous, you can always come back and kind of bring them back to where you can afford to do them. But you never know what's possible if you just sit around and just because you get tired of talking about an idea, if you're not building on it, you're not going to be able to do that one spectacular thing. And I know that in your networking thing, we did where we had to build a brand, if I remember right, for Kansas City.
Yeah, basically a commercial or presentation for a product.
Can you refresh my memory? How did that work?
So we, I think we found a way to kind of randomize groups,
right?
And probably number people off, that type of thing.
Right.
That's a great tool just in general because, again, we kind of touched on this earlier. People tend to go with their clicks, people they're comfortable with.
Right.
Well, then you're not going to get a variety of ideas if you're just with the same, people all the time.
Right.
That's putting you in the box.
Right.
And so that we had small breakout groups. Usually, one thing we like to do is, hey, here's a product, and guess what? There's something wrong, in quotes, wrong with the product. Like, I think we had one that was a cell phone that it can only make calls. You can't text or do anything else with it, something like that. But the job of your group is to make this a positive spin on the product. So we've done things like that. We've done things where people have to come up with, some kind of brand message for, like Kansas City type thing. And here's the thing is everyone has to take part. Right. Because we remember even just like doing the small group stuff in school, there was always that one kid who kind of like took charge.
Right.
It has to be collaborative. Everyone has to take part. Everyone has to have some kind of like speaking role. Right. And you have to build it together.
And nobody can say no.
And nobody can say no. We got to keep saying yes and adding on to ideas until we find that perfect idea that excites people. So that way we're not settling on something like, like Joe's idea. Okay, we're just going to settle on Joe's idea. Well, let's create something that everyone's excited about and has energy about. And then everyone's on board and everyone has ownership.
Right. And there's nothing that says an idea can't be modified as it goes along. I mean, just because you come up with an idea doesn't mean that idea is carved in stone. It just means, here's an idea. Let's see where we can take it. And actually, you can continue building on it all the way to the nth degree, even while it's in process, to make it better. And I find that so exciting because again, it comes back to I believe that the creative process should never end when the business process begins. And if you're being creative in what it is that you're doing, you're going to come up with those things that make you stand out as a brand or as a business as well.
I hear, so it seems that especially these days, you definitely want to stand out and you want to be, if I'm not mistaken, a disruptor in your industry. And you kind of spoke on this earlier. If you are just in your box, if you're just comfortable, if you're like, this has been the way we've always done it. And, we're very comfortable with that. I understand that. But if you don't break outside your mold, you won't be an innovator. And if you're not an innovator, you won't stand out. You won't be competitive.
Yeah, nobody's going to know your name. I mean, it's just,
exactly.
Well, and one of my favorite, I don't even know where I got this, but it said that every interaction is ultimately a transfer of energy and you get what you give. So if you're not giving anything, you're not going to get anything in return. So if you're just going to be, and here's the thing that, especially when it comes to brainstorming, I think this is really important before we move on to the next rule. But I believe this to be really important. Brainstorming is a top-down activity. It's all encompassing. In other words, there can't be an employer that again comes back to the boundaries. You cannot be an employer or the boss going, oh, wait a minute, we can't afford to do that. No, let the ideas, let everything play out, and even contribute yourself so that you can help kind of break the ice and let people know that this is fun to do. And if anybody says no, then you say, no, you can't do, and make sure that you keep the no process out of the yes and,
right,
I guess. So let's talk about a third rule, which I believe you mentioned as well, and that was listening. Listening is probably the gentleman from Second City, Tom Yorton, who's the CEO of Second City, says that in business people tend to listen just to respond as opposed to really listening to understand someone. And when you don't have a script to drive the action, you have to pick up on every shred of information you can, because it may be the one thing that unlocks an idea for you. Now, in business, especially in the wedding industry, one of the biggest downfalls for business owners in the wedding industry is that, we know what we do, and especially when we're sitting down for a sales consultation, we're so excited about telling people what it is that we do. We're not really listening to the person across from the table from us telling what it is that they want. And so the questions that we ask, and this is how I've had this happen in improv before. So we ask a question, and all of a sudden the customer starts talking, and we're already thinking about our next question. So what they're saying, it becomes like in the Charlie Brown shows, wah, 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 wah,
right.
wah, 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 wah. And we move on with our next question because we're just so excited to get to the part of here's what we do, whether it's what you want or not. And the same thing happens in improv, doesn't it?
Yeah, it happens. And I've been certainly been guilty of this. You have those bad habits and they don't entirely go away, but you still recognize them and you're like, oh, okay, I still need to work on this. So on stage, that is, not listening very clearly. Sometimes that's someone's like, hey, I'm your dad. And then later on in the scene, you're like, Mom, you have to listen to me. And you just create a confusion. So there was a lack of listening. And the scene just kind of like falls flat.
Right.
Because then you have to do like a dumb improv joke thing. Like, yeah, I am mom, dad, and dad, mom. That happens with names too. Someone will call someone, listen, Claire, I said my name is Mary. Yeah, I was calling you by your middle name. And it's just, if you just had listened, you would get past that. And it's not just names. It's, what location are we at? What is our relationship to each other? What time period are we in?
Right.
Is there a conflict? What is that conflict? And you can tell, and the audience can tell too, when somebody's already has their thought bubble hanging outside their head, ready to go for their next line. They're not really taking in information. They're just ready to output.
So let's do here's an activity that any business can do that has employees, and it doesn't matter whether you have just one employee or 40 employees. It doesn't really matter. This is called, this activity would be either one word story, or the other way of doing it is one sentence story, if I'm not mistaken, if I remember it right. And the reason I bring this up is because I remember in one of my very early classes, we were doing one word story where you come up with a suggestion. Let's say, what would our suggestion? A story has never been written before. Foster, mm-hmm. What would it be?
The piece of chalk that could.
The piece of chalk that could. So I might start the story as let's go with one sentence. So I might start the story with there once was a piece of chalk that could, but for some reason was never able to find a way.
Yes, Charlie, the piece of chalk, struggled to find his way, and he went in search of a chalkboard.
Yes, and when he found that chalkboard, he made every attempt possible to actually do what he thought he could do in the first place, and was eventually successful.
Yes, he was able to write in cursive, and it turns out mathematical symbols and equations. He was a genius, this Charlie.
Yes, and the Latin. He was able to actually write in Latin. Okay, so we could go on and on with this, but this kind of just like this little example of a yes and type story could be done in any business, just to teach people the value of listening. Because I remember in one of my very early classes, and we were doing this as a big circle, somebody said something that was like 5 people away from me, and that particular thing that they said stayed with me. So when it came around to me, I was responding to what happened 5 sentences ago, which showed I wasn't really listening to what was happening.
Right.
I was in my own head with, this is what I'm going to say, just like a sales presentation. I know what I'm going to say, so it doesn't really matter what anybody else is going to say along the way. Here's what I'm going to say.
And I think that you know, I've been in that place where where I'm in the sidelines during a scene, and I'm waiting for that perfect idea. Right. And it comes from a place of safety. It's insecurity, right?
Right.
So yeah, because I've facilitated, you know, a bunch of team building things where people do that. They're like, oh, I've got this perfect idea. It's so funny, and I'm going to say it when it comes back around. And they're not listening to the ideas that are being presented leading up to them, just like you said. And it comes from a place of not wanting to look foolish and wanting to be smart and funny, but it's not true improv.
No,
you're scripting it out, and you're not responding. You're not listening. And I can understand the motivation for it, but sometimes you just got to jump in the scene. Sometimes you just need to listen and just don't, and you know, jump, and you're like, I don't know if this parachute works or not. Be okay with that. And you are going to be so surprised by what comes out of your mouth. It's going to be wild and weird and wonderful. And something in that is going to be, there's going to be a nugget in there that someone's going to be like, I'm inspired by that. Let's say yes to that idea.
Well, and if you're not listening intently, you're more likely to miss out on amazing opportunities as well. Somebody may say something to you that you go, oh, that's a pretty awesome idea. I mean, I think we've all had customers or friends or somebody, you know, you start with one idea and somebody offers another. And if you're really listening to them, you might go, oh, wait, you know what? Maybe we could add on to that, because you heard that idea rather than just letting it fly by.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about bold choices, making bold choices.
Okay.
A gentleman by the name of Peter Drucker, who is actually an author and the father of modern day business philosophy. I didn't know that there was a father of modern day business.
I did not know that either.
But he said, whenever you see a successful business, it's because someone once made a courageous decision and then stuck with it. And the same thing is true when it comes to an improviser. When we're on stage, one of the first lessons you're taught as an improviser when you go on stage is to make a bold decision and stick with it. Because otherwise you would have a scene perhaps of people, as an example, this is what happens in almost every American family where there's a husband and wife. Honey, where do you want to go to dinner tonight? Oh, I don't know. Where would you like to go? I don't know. I mean, what are you in the mood for? I don't care. What are you in? You know, it's just this can you imagine watching a 20-minute scene of that?
I don't have to imagine it, Ron. I've seen it happen. So, and probably early on in my career, I was in a scene, you know, quite a few scenes like that. So, yeah.
So, but in business, we have a tendency to fret too much. I mean, especially, and this is why Fortune 500 companies spend so much money, invest so much time and money in improv training for people, because when it comes to crisis management, you don't have time to be going, you have to make a decision and move forward. Whether it's the right decision or the wrong decision, at least make a decision. You can apologize for it later if you have to, but for the most part, you know, you move on, don't you?
Yeah, you make, and that's what improv says, make a bold choice. And to be clear, like, you know, when a scene starts, if 2 people come out, and then one person makes a bold choice, you want to listen to that choice,
right,
and then respond to it. Because if you both come out, if someone like bold choice, sometimes they work and sometimes they don't.
Right.
So, but starting with a bold choice, starting like in the middle of things, that's what we always tell, or I've told my improv students, start in the middle of things. That's where it's interesting. Start where they're already at dinner instead of, you know, the conversation of where are we going to go.
Right.
Let's go right to dinner and start with something really interesting.
Well, and it's not just crisis management either. It's just in moving your business forward. You can't get your business to where you want to be if you're constantly questioning how it is you're going to get it there. You've just got to make a bold choice and decide this is the way we're going to do it. And here's, we're going to do it this way, and we're going to go, rather than saying, well, as an example, do we spend money on, let's spend a little money here and a little money on marketing and advertising and spread it all around, rather than just saying, let's go with this idea, rather than trying to spread it all out and go with this and stick with it. And because that's where the return is going to be, rather than trying to spread yourself very, very thin. And I think what happens to, especially for us as humans, we have a tendency to fall back. Again, when we can't make a decision, if we're not moving forward, we're either stalling out or we're moving backwards. So,
yep, that's absolutely right.
So let's fifth rule. We're going to talk about the last rule. Fifth rule. This one is make your partner look good. Explain that in an improv frame of.
So making your partner look good, listening plays a really big part in that. Hearing what your scene partner's saying, saying yes to that, and making it important. If you make what they say important, then you make them look good. And that's especially true if you have like a more experienced improviser with somebody who's, fairly new, right? That normally might come across as uncomfortable, but the more experienced person, the veteran person, is going to do their best to make the newer person look good.
Right.
Make them look amazing, like they're an expert. And that, can definitely apply to business, making your scene partner, your customer, your client look really good. Like, yeah, that's absolutely a fantastic idea, right? Like all their ideas are valid and reaffirm their wants.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it comes back to, again, with that also comes back to yes-anding as well. I mean, too many businesses, I think, are stuck on, I think how many of, even you and I have had these situations where we've dealt with businesses that just, they're not going to bend. This is the way we do it. We don't care if you're unhappy or not. This is just the way we do things. I was at a wedding this weekend at a venue where at the end of the night, father of the bride came up to me and he was talking about the hotel where the reception took place. And he said, he's telling me all about how this particular venue, every time they'd ask for something, they were told that, no, that's not the way we do it. I'm sorry, we can't do that. It's just not something that we do. And he said, I heard that so much, I was beginning to think, what is it that they do then? If everything I'm asking for, they say, no, we can't do that. At what point, when do they say yes to what it is that I'm asking for? Because he didn't feel that his requests were unreasonable. And he said that nobody ever told him why we can't do it that particular way. But it was just so much easier for him just to say, no, it's not the way we do it. And of course, that's not making the customer look good. The customer wants to be in a situation where they're, especially at a wedding, as an example, the customer wants to be in that position where everybody comes up to them and say, wow, this was, the flowers were beautiful, the decor was beautiful, all this stuff, everything. They want people to brag on them. And it's real hard for that to happen if the person, the venue or the vendor or whatever is constantly going, no, we can't do this, we can't do that, we can't do this. They're not going to get the praise at the end of the night that they would have if those individuals had bent for them. So have you, let's talk a little bit about the businesses that you've worked with. Have you seen any improvement from any business that you've ever worked with that where you've gone in and done improv training? What has been the most, what do you think has been the most dynamic change for any business you've worked with?
Usually there are like half-day kind of workshops And usually when there's a follow-up, people are like, our employees they can't stop talking about it. There's all these inside jokes, that came up from the training. We're seeing more kind of like positivity in the workplace, that type of thing. Now, I haven't done a ton of like data tracking. That would be one of my next steps, is to then show that longevity of change. And that does come from, because it is tough to like change a culture, just like with a half-day workshop. But you can introduce those ideas. And if companies they want to continue that positive yes and culture, right. I think you're going to see a lot of really great changes. That's going to be a place people want to work. That's not a place where they're doing their job like 95% of the time, but 5% of the time they're also looking at other opportunities. Right. Well, they're like, oh, okay, I wonder if there's another place that's maybe would appreciate me more, where I could feel heard more.
Sure.
Type of thing.
Well, and I think it's important that at business, it doesn't take a lot to try this, to bring in someone to do. And, we're because of this particular program, we're all across the country and the world. Actually, there are improv troops everywhere. I mean, absolutely everywhere. You can find them on college campuses. You can find them in downtown areas of your city. Reach out to them and see if they offer any kind of a group training, so you can at least just try it and see what the results are. It's kind of funny. I think that just hearing your employees laughing and having a great time in and of itself is of tremendous value, because it lifts a tremendous amount of stress and gives them relief from their day-to-day task, whatever those tasks may be.
Yeah. I know here in Kansas City, there are a few places that offer a drop-in class.
Right.
Where you show up, a Saturday, maybe it's like $15 for 90 minutes. If you think it's something that would be beneficial for your employer, for your workplace, you could check that out. Bring maybe a couple coworkers, maybe bring somebody who's, in charge of training, and try it out, and you're not out a lot of money, you're not out a lot of time. And I can almost guarantee you're going to have a really great time. Every time I've taught a class or a drop-in class or facilitated a team building, there has rarely been anyone who's like, we're not happy. That wasn't fun. No, it's fun right off the bat. There's some, I will say there's some uncomfortableness. There's some timidness. That's because we're starting in the box. We're in our comfort zone. But once we say yes, and we don't judge our ideas, because that's where we're holding ourselves back, because we're like, oh, is this idea good enough? Is this idea smart enough, funny enough? Well, once you let that go and you just come out with something, well, guess what? You have a bunch of other people who are going to support that idea. And once you realize that there's that support net, then it's very freeing, and you'll be surprised by what ideas will come forward, and you're going to have a blast.
And I love the diversity of people that come to these classes. One of my very first friends as an improviser was a guy, his name is Eric, and he was maybe 2 or 3 years out of college, but he was a nuclear engineer by trade. I mean, and very A-type personality. I mean, just and very quiet. But the minute he got on stage, oh my God, it's like, where did this guy come from? And it was like day and night, because he'd be on stage and I took a music improv class with him, and he'd be the first one to start building on the song. But then off stage, he was back to pretty much that A-type. But I asked him one time, why do you do this? And it's because of the release factor, and if you're a nuclear engineer, and your job is to work on bombs, I guess that's one way of it.
Right.
I'd rather see you doing it that way than, any other way. But it's amazing the diversity, not just nuclear engineers, but I mean, people come from all sorts of different backgrounds.
Yep.
And come together and as I said, it's probably the most level playing field for any activity that I've ever known. And I think that's kind of cool in a business as well, if you can get people onto that level playing field and give them an opportunity to start yesing each other and yes-anding each other and truly listening to each other and really just kind of supporting each other, trying to make each other look good rather than just making themselves look good. I think what you're going to find is that your business is going to grow. It's actually going to come up. You're going to come up with some spectacular ideas that are going to do what we started talking about at the very top of this conversation, and that is a way to make your business stand out, to make it look, to do something spectacular and amazing, that not only people will go, wow, that's pretty cool, but that your customers are going to tell others about, so that they're going to want to come and experience those things for themselves. So, Foster, this has been a great conversation. Unfortunately, we have to think about bringing it to an end.
Okay.
I love, one of the things I love doing, and I learned this actually from improv, was at the end of every improv class, instructors always ask, didn't matter which instructor, would always say, what's your greatest takeaway today? What do you think should be the greatest takeaway for most people from this conversation today? You go first and then I'll go.
Okay. I think one of the great takeaways about improv, you were just touching on this, is that it's a great like equalizer. Mm-hmm. Like you said, it levels the playing field. Everyone is valid, from the CEO to the new hire, when it comes to improv, and it's very low risk, and it's easy in terms of, there's not like equipment you need or anything. You just need people in a room, and it's great having like a trained facilitator there to put everyone at ease and to really guide it. But at this base level, get people in a circle, right? And just do some fun make-em-ups and take 10, 15 minutes out of a meeting. Mm-hmm. And just, and look up an improv exercise. If you got in contact with me, I'd be happy to recommend something, just like a fun warm-up. And you'll be surprised what that little bit does. And you're not out really any time or money or anything. It's just people listening and responding to each other. It's a weird kind of magic.
Well, and it doesn't last. I mean, it doesn't last long. It's like getting a shot. You feel it for a second, then it's gone. I saw a quote from, I can't remember the improviser's name, and I'm paraphrasing. It was something to the effect of, the good thing about improv is if it's a bad scene, it's forgotten 20 minutes later. Yep. But the bad thing about improv is if it's a great scene, it's forgotten 20 minutes later. So it's one of those things. You can beat yourself, which I do, but you can beat yourself up after a performance, but it doesn't matter. It's and you can't redo it because it was improvised. Before I give my takeaway, you said if you contact you, what's the best way for people to contact you if they want to do that? Yeah.
So Yesco, our website is yescompany.biz. Mm-hmm. You can reach out to me through email. You could do michael@yescompany.biz.
Okay.
If you're interested in voiceover stuff, whether you have like some kind of internal video for your company, certainly a commercial, any kind of narration, that type of thing, you could email me, michaelfosteractor@gmail.com.
Okay, awesome. And for those of you trying to get a hold of him as an improviser, don't forget the extension is .biz, not .com.
That's right.
So my great takeaway comes from, again, I go back to this book. I absolutely love this book. If you want to make changes in your business, you want to do it through brainstorming, pick up Hatch by C. McNair Wilson. But one of my favorite quotes from his book is that, and this all has to do with yes and, is that we are smarter than me, and which I think is one of the greatest takeaways you can have, is realizing that you are not always the smartest person in the room ever. I mean, there are people that with all these different diverse ideas coming at you, you can do so much better than what you have to offer just on your own. So that's my great takeaway. So Foster, thank you so much for being with me today. It's been awesome. And for those of you watching, I will be back again on the last Tuesday of November. For some reason, I always forget to look at the calendar before I do that. So it's the last Tuesday. We'll remind you as we get closer not to worry. Just watch Facebook and you'll know. So once again, thank you so much for joining me. It's Ron Ruth of Ron Ruth Presents here on Disc Jockey News TV, and I will see you next month.
Thanks, Ron.
Bye, Foster. Bye.